Penguin Random House Audio presents Disquiet by Zülfü Livaneli. Translated from the Turkish by Brendan Freely. Read for you by Hemi Yeroham. To Ülkeren Aylin, with gratitude to my dear friend Necati for expanding my knowledge on Mardin. While my son was dying, the flowers were screaming and budding. Anonymous Anatolian mother. Do you know what harese is, my son? It's an old Arabic word. The words for determination, greed, and craving are derived from it. I'll tell you what harese is, my boy. You know how they call camels the ships of the desert? These blessed animals can walk and walk through the desert without eating or drinking for 3 weeks, thirsty and hungry. I mean, that's how tough they are. But there's a thistle in the desert they're very fond of. Wherever they see this thistle, they bite some off and begin chewing. The sharp thistle lacerates the camel's mouth, and these cuts begin to bleed. The camel likes it even more when the salty taste of the blood mixes with the thistle. So the more it eats, the more it bleeds, and the more it bleeds, the more it eats. Somehow, it can't get its fill of its own blood, and if it's not stopped, the camel will bleed to death. This is called harese. As I said earlier, the words for determination, greed, and craving come from it. This is the custom throughout the Middle East, my son. Throughout history, people have killed one another without ever realizing that they are actually killing themselves. They become intoxicated by the taste of their own blood. Journey to Hussein. That which mixes with the red wind. What made it difficult for me to tell this story were 2 statements that I heard and was unable to forget. They kept wandering through my mind. The first was, "You can't protect me any longer, mother, not even if you took me and put me back in your womb." The second was, "I was a human being." 2 different people, 2 different places, and 2 different statements that affected me deeply. But first, let me tell you how it all began. We were gathered around the oval table on the 2nd floor of the newspaper for the editorial meeting we held every morning at 11. We were going over the news, and the chief of each section was filling us in on the details. As usual, the colleague with nicknamed Chief Inspector Recep was laying out his most gruesome photographs for the news that would appear on page 3. We were accustomed to the way he spoke. Whenever he said he'd got a fantastic shot, we knew we would be confronted by images of horrifying accidents or murders, and that we would definitely see mangled bodies. In the language of journalism, the more blood in a photograph, the more fantastic it is. He began with the femicides that he referred to as common occurrences. A young woman who was stabbed in the street by her former husband. A policeman who shot his wife with his service revolver and then killed himself. He read each story, showed the photographs, and then moved on. In the end, he spoke of an incident to which he didn't attach much importance. A Turk named Hussein Yilmaz, who worked at his 2 older brothers' pizza place in the German city of Duisburg, had been stabbed and killed by neo-Nazis. The severely wounded 32-year-old native of Mardin had been brought to the hospital but did not survive. The mayor of the city made a statement deploring the incident and defending the rights of the millions of Turks living in Germany. He went on to say how they couldn't allow this kind of hostility toward Islam and Turks. There was no gruesome photograph, because they don't print photographs like that in Germany. But a stringer had found a photograph of the deceased in the Mardin census records. The editor decided to go with a brief version of the story, since it might catch the interest of religious readers, but something else had occurred to me. If this person's name was Hussein Yilmaz, and if he'd been born in Mardin and was 32 years old, it couldn't be anyone other than my childhood friend Hussein, unless two people named Hussein Yilmaz were born in the same city in the same year. I asked Chief Inspector Recep where in Mardin this person was born, and when he answered that his official residence was in the Kızıltepe district and that he'd been born there, I had not the slightest doubt that the man killed in Germany was our Hussein. The boy I'd sat next to in class for years, with whom I'd played tipcat and marbles and stolen baby birds from their nests. That small, curious boy I hadn't seen in years. When I flew to meet Hussein's family in Mardin, that ancient city, lost in time on the Syrian border, was once again covered with red dust. The streets and the clouds of red dust that painted the houses seemed like a set designed by an expert director, appropriate for creating the atmosphere for the burning pain of a family that had lost a son, and for the prophetic words Hussein had uttered to his mother. I was familiar with these clouds of red dust. As a child, when Hussein and I were at school together, red winds like this would also blow in from the Syrian desert, and we would all be covered in red in a desert heat that made it difficult to even breathe. When the red wind came, the shopkeepers would gather their goods off the counters. Everyone would rush inside, and those who remained outside ran along coughing as they held handkerchiefs over their mouths. When I returned to my city after many years, I was once again greeted by the same red clouds. "You can't protect me any longer, mother, not even if you took me and put me back in your womb." These had been his last words to his mother. The old woman, whose eyes were red from weeping, kept repeating these words as she wiped her tears with the edge of her white muslin headscarf. His sister Aysel had heard this too. She'd also been there when they were saying farewell at the door. She'd thrown her arms around her older brother's neck, but he'd sunk into a deep listlessness. It was as if he'd given up on life. He didn't even raise his arms. In any event, he couldn't raise his left arm because of the bullet wound in his shoulder. It was as if he knew he was going to his death. His sister said it was then that she felt there was nothing they could do to help him, and that perhaps it was because of that girl. "You can't protect me any longer, mother, not even if you took me and put me back in your womb." These weren't the last words he uttered in his life, but it was the last thing he said when he was parting from his mother and his sister. In any event, his father had already died, and his two older brothers were in Germany. The day Hussein bade farewell to his family was also tinted red like this. Aysel told me that when she last saw her older brother at the door, his face was orange from the dust. Her mother poured a bucket of water after him, calling after him to not think bad thoughts and to go and return like water. But he'd already disappeared into that red cloud. "The last time I saw my son, he looked as if his face was covered in blood," his mother said. Then she turned to Aysel. "Don't ever mention that she-devil's name in this house again. She consumed my mighty son. She brought disaster wherever she went. She extinguished..."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?